Today I share some tips on how to repeat stamp a panel for a card. Hi, it's Therese from Lostinpaper, and I've got the most amazing scooter image that I want to repeat stamp across the front of my card. I ride a scooter, that's my mode of transport, and I just couldn't wait to play with this set from Alan Hudson, and it's from a new release and it's called Good Times. So I've got a piece of 80-pound Nina white cardstock, and it's cut to the same size as the front of my card. I just find it's easier to work on a separate piece of cardstock. I'm using my Fiskars stamp press, and I have got my image lined up so it's straight with the grid lines, and then that just allows me to use the grid lines to make sure that each time I stamp the image it's going to be lining up with the lines on the stamp press. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's very forgiving, this technique. So I'm stamping this particular scooter first because this is going to be my highlight image, so I'm stamping it in that sweet spot. So I've used the rule of thirds, where you divide your panel into 3 vertical and 3 horizontal sections, and where those lines overlap is the sweet spot for that power, you know, that real kind of balance that you can get with an image on a design, especially a clean and simple design. Balance can be really important. So every time I restamp this image, I make sure that the lines are straight with my cardstock. If you want to be really pedantic, then you can actually make sure you're using the same line exactly each time and kind of remember where it was on the stamp press. I really just eyeballed it here, but by making sure each time I stamped that the lines were equal with the edges of the cardstock, I knew that at least my image would be straight. I do make sure to stamp the little pieces off the edge of the cardstock as well, then it looks like it was meant to be that way. You can easily do this without a stamp press. I find the large one is easier for me because it gives me more visual field. The smaller one kind of cuts off the edges a bit when I'm doing a whole panel like this, but you can simply do this with a block and eyeballing it, which is what I did here. This is my scrap practice piece of paper, and I'm just kind of working out now what color I think I might like to color my highlight image. And if you notice there, I didn't actually use my stamp press for that. I actually just used a block, and it turned out pretty well. I probably could have just used a block, but I wanted to make sure it was a little bit more structured, and I didn't want to have so much chance for error, and the stamp press just really is a good tool for that. I'm leaving a couple of highlights with the Copic markers here, and I'm doing that because I want this to be a red shiny scooter. I've actually just left the white cardstock showing through because I'm going to be using glossy accents on this image, and I've found that if I use a white gel pen to draw highlights on my image, when I covered it with glossy accents it kind of gets lost and you can't see it anymore. So I was fairly careful to do that this time. The sentiment is from the same stamp set, and I've got some black cardstock, embossing it with some white powder, and just stamped it out a few times. It says beep beep. And I wanted it to look a little bit messy. I know it's not really, and that's not really messy, I suppose, but what I decided to do was just freehand cut this with my scissors. But I just wanted to also show you that the exclamation mark didn't stamp out very well. I think I pushed too heavily on it, or the Versamark ink pad might have been a bit too juicy. So I just came in with a craft knife and scratched it away so that it looked like an exclamation mark again and not an L, a beepy. I suppose having a beepy beepy wouldn't be too bad after all. I never thought about that. Alright, I'm just going to attach my panel to the front of my card, and that's another reason why I use the 80-pound Nina, because I find that the Copic's blend better for me on the lighter cardstock, and because they're going to bleed through to the back by using a separate piece of cardstock, then they're not going to be seen from the inside of the card. And then I popped up the sentiments that I've cut out with my scissors, and I did use some black foam squares for that, just in case someone decides to sneak a peek around the edge. They're not going to see it if it's black. And I don't know about you, but I have a real love-hate relationship with glossy accents. I don't use it very often because it makes me cry. Anyway, after I unclogged this bottle, which is another one that I bought because I keep clogging up the big bottles, what I like to do is work in a section at a time, fill in the gap, then come in and move any air bubbles out with either a craft pick or a craft knife. And then, because it's thick, old and gluggy, I just gave it a good whack on the desk. So after being gentle, I had to give it a whack. But it behaved after all, and I didn't have to start again. So I'll link everything that I've used today at my blog. You can find the link in the description below. Thanks so much for joining me. Till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.